I'm Lisa Evers, and this is Street Soldiers.
Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
Even though he's behind bars in solitary confinement facing murder charges, Suge Knight remains one of the most feared people in the music industry. So we're asking the question, is he being written out of hip-hop history?
Brother Suge Knight, let's give him a big hand.
Only thing I would like to say, if it weren't for the community, there would be no Death Row Records.
Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight with his artists Tupac and Snoop Dogg
How y'all doing out there?
supported a voter registration rally in 1996. Around the time, they were on a Vibe magazine cover titled Hip Hop's Ferocious First Family. I spoke with his 21-year-old son, Suge Jacob, who says his dad is misunderstood.
They don't look at him as a human anymore, and that's what they need to do, look at him as a human.
I interviewed Suge Knight in 2002 at Hot 97, soon after he came home from a 5-year prison bid on a parole violation. Since then, he's had brushes with the law and 2 felony convictions. Now he's in the legal fight of his life, maybe for his life, charged with murder and attempted murder. The weapon, his pickup truck. His legal team says he was ambushed and fleeing for his life when he ran over 2 men. One died, the other injured. Prominent criminal defense attorney Charles Tucker Jr. says they can argue self-defense.
And I think there's a strong showing or a strong ability to actually have a viable self-defense claim.
Knight is on his 6th legal team as he grapples with his poor health while on lockdown. Diabetes and blood clots. He's collapsed in court.
He's almost died 3 times because of the blood clots that they're causing inside the jail.
Suge Jacob has launched a website, supportsuge.com. He believes the solitary confinement, high $10 million bail, and ban on visitors, even family members, violate his dad's rights.
Erosion of civil rights for those who are incarcerated, I'm starting to see a pattern of that more and more.
So which is it? Are Suge Knight's civil rights being denied, or is justice being served? Let's take it to our panel and find out what they have to say. Joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers, Soumya Krishnamurthy. She's a music journalist and pop culture expert. Soumya, thank you so much for being with us.
How are you?
All right, great. Really appreciate you being here with us. Also joining us, Lord Jamar, hip-hop artist. You know him as part of the group Brand Nubian. He's also an actor. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We really appreciate it. Also joining us, Charles Tucker Jr. He's a criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, and founding partner of the Tucker Moore Law Group. Soumya, let me start with you. In Suge's heyday, how big of a figure was he in hip-hop?
You can't talk about hip-hop without talking about Suge Knight. In his heyday, he really was larger than life. When you think about the biggest West Coast artists, Tupac Shakur, Dr. Dre, Snoop, he was instrumental in their careers, and he really created Death Row not just as an influential label, but as a brand. When you heard that Death Row name, it just kind of conjured up, what does that brand mean? It was sort of a by any means necessary, menacing, intimidating brand that they got what they wanted, and they had a lot of success, both critically and commercially.
Lord Jamar, take us back to the late 1990s, because there was just a lot more violence at that time, period. But what was going on, you were at the famous Source Awards,
Right.
you know, whatever you want to call it, episode,
Yeah.
incident. Tell us about that, what it was like being around the music scene at that time.
I mean, it was definitely, it was a lot of tension at that time, especially for East Coast, West Coast. Like you said, I was at the Source Awards when that happened that night. I was also at the after party at the Tunnel, maybe feet away from when Suge and Puffy had their little altercation. And it was just, when Suge Knight walked into a room, there was just an air that, it could pop off, and it made a lot of people uncomfortable, and if you had a problem with him, I guess you didn't want to be around when he walked in,
So that was a real feeling, a real vibe that you got, even in a place that was so packed and so huge like the Tunnel.
Absolutely. I was at another club, I forget the name of it, down on Houston, and he came in there, and it was just like his whole aura was like, get out my way, like, you know what I mean? It's Suge Knight, I'm here, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Death Row. And people was getting out his way, like, you know what I mean? Like, Yeah, he had that kind of aura about him.
And does it surprise you that to this day, even with him behind bars, and he has spent a number of years on parole violations and other things locked down, that he still inspires that kind of fear? When I've been mentioning his name to people all week and prepping for the show, they're like, "Whoa," like that, I
mean, he said earlier, Snoop called him the boogeyman, in a lot of people's minds, that's who he was, and I think he kind of embraced that role of being the boogeyman.
Like the gangster to the max.
Absolutely. It was all about fear and intimidation, but at the same time, that's the American way.
Right, that's what a lot of
really
people
look
say.
at it.
Until you get caught and until you get locked down. Charles Tucker Jr., you looked at some of those court pages and papers. The charges against him are pretty serious.
Oh yeah, they definitely stacked against him in a lot of regards. But there's also a defense side to it. I also had a chance to look at the video, to what extent it was edited or not. There's a clear defense in there. And if you look at when the vehicle struck him, it appears another individual goes over and they take something out, what appears to be a weapon, and put it in his, he put the weapon in his back pocket and goes off. So from, and looking at some of the counts or the defense details, they're detailing a self-defense case. So there are definitely elements of that are evident that, to me, should at least cause some reasonable doubt in minds of reasonable juries, notwithstanding any of his past convictions or crimes. But in this instance, just objectionably looking at the video, there's enough there, Lisa, for reasonable doubt.
For reasonable doubt and to cast. So people who are writing him off right now, it's a little premature for that.
I think so, because there are additional facts. I mean, as you know, last year there's some facts that came to light, and quite recently we found out that this L.A. sheriff has been indicted, and he's been charged with, mishandling some cases. And just last year, this same sheriff department, one of the investigators have said, or one of the their so-called confidential informants came out and said that they were pushed to make misleading statements in this case. So there's a lot
of grime.
Absolutely.
Just a straight up a lot of grime. So, do you think what extent, like with the case, here Suge is called to this, he's called to this place, location by Terry Carter, they're supposed to make nice. Then some other guy comes up that's with him and punches him in the face. And then his son claims it was self-defense, that's what he was doing. But how much of this do you think is attributable to the myths around him and to this image that Lord Jamar is talking about?
Yeah, when you think of Suge Knight, he was actually known as the most feared man in hip-hop. I don't know who gave him that title, but it was a title that stuck with him, and everyone's kind of used it for years. And, one thing we have to remember, Suge's a big guy. This is a guy who's 6'3", 300 something, used to play football, almost, semi-professionally. And, I think that just physically he was very imposing. And, in many ways, it's sort of perception is reality. So as you said, if he's known as the boogeyman, he never did anything to sort of dissuade that reputation. His reputation precedes him. So really any story, when we're talking about Suge, it always conjures up all the other stuff. You can't ever really have a clean slate. And I think in this case as well, we don't know really the specifics. Obviously, the jury has to go through everything. But the minute you hear Suge's involved, already you think about all the other stuff that he was involved in.
It's hard to just detach from all those stories.
I think it's impossible to detach it because, really to find a juror who doesn't know who Suge Knight is, they probably lived on Mars for the past 30 years.
Right, because
it's really impossible.
Exactly.
Yeah, for me, I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, not East, not West, the Midwest before it was really even, a hip hop market. But I knew who Suge was growing up because when you think of Death Row, it was really, those iconic four individuals. And you remember, I think in '96, Vibe did that great cover where it was Dre and Snoop and Pac and Suge. And for a label owner to be really as well known and notorious as his artist is huge. So he made an impact everywhere. And I think to find a juror who doesn't know who Suge Knight is going to be really hard.
And we have to give him credit for branding, because that was one thing that
Kalamazoo, Michigan, knew who Suge Knight is.
But now, can you convict someone on their reputation?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. We need to take a break. And this is Street Soldiers. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. We're talking about the Suge Knight case. We'll be back right after this.
A lot of people wish that he just would go away, wish that he would disappear.
Right now, he has very little power, according to his son. He's in solitary confinement, been there for a long time. He's been shot on a couple of different occasions. His son says he has blood clot issues with his leg, which is very serious, because if it goes to your heart, you're just dead like that. His son, Suge Jacob, says he can't even get in to see his dad. So is that typical in a case like this?
I can tell you, Lisa, I'd like to say no. I got several cases where individuals who are incarcerated, the evidence against them is flimsy at best, are suffering from serious medical conditions. I could name agencies, federal agencies, that are responsible for this, who I'm advocating on behalf of my client just to get a basic witness, family members in to see them. So yeah, I see this more and more. And what I'm starting to see, Lisa, is the erosion of civil rights. We have gone from a society, or at least a criminal justice society, where innocent until proven guilty, used to exist, maybe in theory, but that theory is long gone. Once the charges emerge, the person is as good as guilty. And if they have a reputation, well, the reputation is then built to the tilt. And then, we see prosecutors overcharging, excessive bail on cases. I know cases locally where this is the case, and it doesn't.
So this is not that uncommon, you're saying, is to be held without. But what about the bail? Because this was the other issue. Initially, it was $25 million bail. This is not a guy that can go anywhere in the United States, probably a lot of places in the world, and put on a disguise, and people are going to not recognize him. The bail got dropped to $10 million, which his son says he cannot afford, because we don't know what his financial situation is. Is that really high on a first-degree murder for somebody who's been convicted of a felony on 2 previous occasions?
But what's interesting, Lisa, and I see this happen across the board as well. The excessive bail. Again, I see situations. I have a case where I know particularly where a man is 70 years old and still incarcerated, never convicted of any criminal offense, and he sits in jail waiting trial. And the prosecutor's office turns a blind eye, makes false accusations that he could, flee to Jamaica or Haiti. It's a sham. Bail used to be used to make sure the person would have actually their day in court and hold something over their head.
That they would show up.
They would show up.
Because otherwise they lose the money.
Right. And in that, they would have to make a clear showing that the person had no legitimate ties and had no connections to the community. And, it's not meant as a punishment. But now, more and more you see it's being used as a punishment. Almost a sentence is being imposed long before jury's even picked. And that's what's really sad.
And that's what's going on here. Somi, in terms of the money, the music business has changed so much in the time from when Suge first started with Death Row to now. But do we have any idea? Like, does he have any money left, or would he still be getting royalties or anything like that? Do you think?
When it comes to Suge, the money is as murky as anything. Half the time you hear that he's broke and he actually sold Death Row some years back, and then other times he still seems to be doing quite well. And not too long ago he actually asserted that he's owned, I believe, 30% of Dre's earnings as some sort of long-time deal that they struck. So if Dr. Dre is a billionaire with Apple, then technically Suge could be 1/3 of a billionaire. So again, there's a lot of legal back and forth. It's uncertain, and with a guy like him, to be completely honest, like many people of means, you don't know if there's assets maybe hidden places, or maybe it's under his kids' names, or maybe a former partner's name. So we really don't know. But I think insofar as compared to the height of Death Row, financially, I would wager to say that by no means is he kind of on par with that anymore.
Lord Jamar, what about in terms of the music industry too? Like his reputation, were artists going like, I gotta get with Death Row? Not New York, right?
Nah, I don't know. I don't know nobody in New York that was trying to get with Death Row. Like, you had people in New York that was actually scared to go to California at that time.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Because it was real like that. But that was probably like a Cali dude's dream at the time.
A West Coast dream.
If you grew up in L.A. or anywhere in that area on the West Coast, you probably wanted to get down with Death Row. Shoot. MC Hammer ended up signing with Death Row for a minute. That's how hyped up, Death Row was at one point.
Even Left Eye, before she passed, was had signed to Suge, and this is
and that was crazy.
After all the East Coast, West Coast, But what's interesting is, does his name kind of still hold weight? And a few years ago, he actually shouted out YG from Compton, and YG went on the record and said, that's a big look. Like, I appreciate that compliment, to paraphrase, but I think his name in certain parts of hip hop still does hold weight. Like, that's a cosign.
And still resonates strongly.
Absolutely.
So, Lord Jamar, do you think there's a lot of people that are counting him out? They're like, okay, he's done. He's got this heavy charge. His health is in bad shape. This guy is finished, but he doesn't seem like the guy that's ever finished.
I mean, I think that's what a lot of people want for him. A lot of people wish that he just would go away, wish that he would disappear. And when you say in the beginning of the show, are they trying to write him out of hip hop history? It's like, people just want to forget about him altogether now.
That's scary. He was that scary.
Yeah, he was that scary to some people. Now, you might not agree with his methods and all of that, but as far as his accomplishments in hip-hop, there's no way you can write him out. You know what I mean? He was involved. He was the major force in one of the biggest hip-hop labels, probably that ever
Especially
existed.
from the time. What about like the Vanilla Ice story that he's trying to get the publishing from Vanilla Ice, the publishing rights, so he hangs him by his ankles out a hotel window? Is that a legend or is that?
From what I hear,
fact?
That's real.
I mean, Vanilla Ice kind of confirmed it, right?
Vanilla Ice, it's funny because I think with Suge, there's always two sides to every coin. Because Vanilla Ice went on Sway and he's like, the story didn't happen that way. And previous, I think, was like Interview Magazine. He's like, no, Suge came to me. It was very sort of gentlemanly. But what's crazy is how, you can kind of rewrite history because now Vanilla Ice says, because of me and the money I gave Suge, that helped launch Death Row. So in a weird way, Vanilla Ice almost has pride. Like, wow, because I was shaken down, somehow, allegedly.
He found the silver lining in that.
And he even went on record saying me and Suge are friends. So I think one thing about Suge, to play devil's advocate, we have to remember, when he's getting you results, everyone loves him, right? When he was allegedly going to Jerry Heller with baseball bats and making sure that NWA got out of their contracts, specifically Dr. Dre, so he could go to Death Row, when he's bailing Pac out, when he's doing all these nice things for you, everyone seems to love Suge. Right. But the minute that, the coin flips and maybe you guys aren't agreeing, that's when sort of the boogeyman, the bully, the intimidation. So it's, we have a very tenuous relationship with him because it's a love-hate. It depends who you're asking at what point of the deal. They either love him, he gets results, or they're terrified.
And they need someone to come in and shake it up. It's like, call Suge.
Yeah, literally.
My thing is, so what if he did these things? Like, yeah, there might be bad things. Can we charge him on this crime that he's being charged for now?
Right.
Can we aggregate all his thuggery and boogeyman-ness and encapsulate that into this particular crime, which it seems like they're trying to do. It's like OJ. OJ's not getting served for going in taking his stuff. He's getting served for killing Nicole Brown and in people's minds. But
it's like people just look for a case.
But they found a case for him because they didn't get him on the other one. Suge has escaped so many other times, prosecution and all that. So finally, when they get him on this, it's like, yo, we got you.
All right, well, I want to thank all of you for being with us. for this episode of Street Soldiers on the Suge Knight case. Soumya Krishnamurthy, Lord Jamar, and Charles Tucker Jr. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us for Street Soldiers. I'm Lisa Evers. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I hope it's your only weapon. Let's push for peace.